I grow tired of asking this, so it'll be the last time. Where is the rebel base?
Do you still remember the feeling of seeing the green glow of a Jedi lightsaber for the first time? The entire theatre in 1977 seemed to hold its breath. A galaxy far away appeared. The roar of the Millennium Falcon's engines echoed through the stars, and the opening words slowly scrolled across the screen. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, Star Wars was not just a movie, it was a collective dream. A dream about a young boy who could stand up against darkness, believe in goodness, and restore light to the entire universe. Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Princess Leia. They were no longer just characters, but faces of an era. A belief that even in a world full of fire and smoke, good could still triumph. Behind those dazzling frames were stories the audience back then never heard. Filming days buried by desert storms, a secret romance blossoming between two young stars, and real wounds, flesh and blood, that the actors carried for life. More than half a century has passed, but every time the Star Wars theme plays, the hearts of viewers still stir as they did in the beginning. Today, let's return to 1977 to uncover 20 strange, sometimes heartbreaking facts hidden behind the film that turned sweat tears and real tragedy into an immortal legend of cinematic history. 20. Darth Vader, a nightmare crafted from 4 souls. In 1976, Shepperton Studios was shrouded in thick artificial smoke like a battlefield fog. The door of the Tantive 4 blasted open, and from the darkness a colossal black figure emerged. The sound of boots striking the metal floor, thud, thud, thud. Each step seemed to freeze the air itself. Then, for the first time, the mechanical breathing echoed hiss, whoosh, hiss, whoosh. The entire set fell silent. They weren't just watching a character, they were witnessing the birth of an icon. But no one knew that he, Darth Vader, was not one person. He was a nightmare pieced together from 4 different lives. His towering frame, broad shoulders and heavy iron-like steps belonged to David Prowse, a British bodybuilder. He made every movement of Vader slow, ruthless, as if each step crushed the past. But when the cameras rolled for lightsaber battles, Prowse was replaced. The armour was too heavy. He was too slow. That's when Bob Anderson, a master swordsman from the British Olympic team, was called in. Hidden beneath the black mask, Anderson turned Vader's attacks into a deadly dance. The red and green glow of the saber reflected off the steel helmet like the heartbeat of a demon. Then, when Vader spoke, it was yet another person. A deep, gravelly voice resonating as if from the deepest abyss of the universe. No, I am your father, James Earl Jones. A man who never wore the armour, never held a saber, but whose voice turned an obscure character into a symbol of power and fear for an entire generation. And finally, when the mask was removed, when Vader lay dying in blinding white light, that face belonged to none of them. It was Sebastian Shaw, old, frail, with trembling eyes, seeking forgiveness he could never attain in life. 1 character, 4 people. 1 icon, 4 souls breathing in unison. Darth Vader wasn't acted, he was created like a Frankenstein of cinema, with muscle, with voice, with swordplay, with heart. And perhaps that's why he was so terrifyingly real, a nightmare born from 4 living souls. To you, what is Vader? An unforgivable villain, or a pitiful father buried in the steel he forged himself? 19. Princess Leia, a casting that nearly changed the galaxy. Fall of 1976, Los Angeles. George Lucas's casting office glowed under white lights, but no one knew this place would shape cinematic history. Dozens of young women passed through that door, each carrying hopes of becoming the princess of the galaxy. A blonde girl, Jodie Foster, 14 years old, stepped in. Sharp eyes, intelligent voice. She spoke confidently, decisively. Lucas watched, then shook his head. Too young. Next came Sigourney Weaver, tall, strong, tough. But her eyes belonged to a warrior, not a princess. Then Meryl Streep, a rising talent but not quite right. Lucas still hadn't found the soul he needed. The casting room grew heavy. Everyone was exhausted. Then the door opened, a small girl stepped in. Neatly tied hair, white shirt, old jeans. Nothing remarkable. Carrie Fisher, 19 years old. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes blazing like a meteor. She read the line the world would later memorize, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope." Her voice quivered, but her eyes burned with determination. She didn't act. She lived every word. Lucas watched her in silence for a few seconds, then turned to the producer. "That's Leia." No drums, no applause. But from that moment, Carrie Fisher became the heart of Star Wars. On set, Fisher was a mix of rebellion and charm. She rewrote her lines, teased her co-stars, and dared to argue with the director when needed. She refused to be a weak princess. Her Leia was smart, sarcastic, strong, a heroine who saved herself. Years later, Carrie Fisher laughed and said, "I was just trying to survive a movie full of men." But she did more than that. She turned Leia into the first feminist icon of sci-fi, making millions of girls believe women could wield guns, give orders, and lead entire galaxies. If Lucas had chosen someone else that day, Star Wars might still have succeeded, but it would lack a soul. Because only Carrie Fisher dared tell the world a princess doesn't need saving. She's the one who saves the galaxy. 18. C-3PO, Anthony Daniels' Golden Prison. Elstree Studios, 1976. Under blazing lights, Anthony Daniels stood in the middle of the room, sweat pouring down his forehead. Before him was a gleaming golden suit, the one that would turn him into C-3PO, the most courteous droid in the galaxy. No one told him it was also the worst trap of his life. As the suit was pieced onto him, Daniels realized he was being locked alive. Each metal piece clamped like shackles. When the final piece snapped shut, he couldn't bend, couldn't sit, couldn't even breathe deeply. "I saw the world through a tiny slit," he recalled, and every sound echoed like it came from the bottom of a pit. On screen, C-3PO's slow, clumsy movements made audiences laugh. But in reality, it was genuine pain. The suit weighed over 20 kilograms with no ventilation. Tunisia's desert heat soared past 40 degrees. Each day, Daniels lost nearly 2 kilograms of water, sometimes fainting mid-scene. But when the director yelled action, he sprang up. Every trembling step, every awkward turn, it was all real, no acting needed. That imperfection made C-3PO human. Behind the polished gold was a man exhausted but still forcing a smile to let his droid shine. After the film wrapped, Daniels swore he'd never wear the suit again. But when Lucas called for the sequel, he only said, "No one else can be C-3PO. Even if it's hell, it's my hell." C-3PO wasn't just the perfect assistant droid in the galaxy. He was a human in metal, carrying the breath of loneliness, the smile of endurance, and a heart of true gold forged from the sweat and blood of the man inside. 17. The once-in-50-years storm that nearly swallowed Tatooine. Tunisia's desert, 1976. George Lucas wanted to open his film with a scene so desolate it would leave audiences breathless. A blazing red sun hanging over scorching dunes where young Luke Skywalker gazes at a distant horizon. But when the crew arrived, they didn't meet sunlight, but the heaviest rain in over half a century. Winds howled like an angry desert's roar. Sand whipped up, turning into thick mud. Golden hills became a sea of sludge, and spaceship models, months of preparation, sank into murky water. Set pieces collapsed, camera lenses flooded, and the young director could only watch his Tatooine planet dissolve before his eyes. Some crew members panicked. One said, "We're done, George." But Lucas, drenched in rain, just smiled faintly and shook his head. "No one's going to believe this story." He didn't give up. When the rain stopped, they dried every cloth, rebuilt every wall, and scraped mud off models by hand. The sand dried, the sky turned golden again, and in just days, Tatooine, the driest planet in the galaxy, was born from mud and rainwater. On screen, it's where dreams begin. In reality, Tatooine was a symbol of resilience of a young director who wouldn't yield to fate, and a small crew daring to rebuild a universe amidst a storm. 16. The legendary opening crawl was shot by hand. In a small workshop in Van Nuys, California, there were no grand studios, no CGI, just a group of technicians hunched over a 2-meter blackboard. On it, they pasted glowing golden text, "A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away." That was the legendary Star Wars opening crawl, but instead of computers, it was filmed manually, centimetre by centimetre. A 35mm camera was tilted, moving slowly along the angled board to create the illusion of text drifting into infinite space. A single speck of dust on the lens or a slight motor shake meant starting over. Some days the team spent over 10 hours to capture 5 seconds of perfect footage. "We worked like we were doing heart surgery," one technician recalled. "Every movement had to be precise to the breath." None of them imagined that tiny film strip would become a pop culture icon. And every time those golden words scroll up against a black void, millions of viewers worldwide feel the same thing. Their hearts beat faster. Childhood memories flood back, and they know they're about to enter that distant galaxy again. Few realise that legendary universe began not with technology, but with a board. A shaky lens and hands pushing a dream forward millimetre by millimetre. 15. George Lucas nearly didn't create Star Wars because of a Flash Gordon rejection. In 1971, George Lucas, just 27 years old, was a young director brimming with dreams. In his mind echoed the hum of spaceships, laser flashes, and images of Flash Gordon soaring among the stars. He wanted to bring that world to the screen to revive his childhood with light and music. Lucas pitched his draft to studios speaking passionately, but the person across the table coldly said, "Impossible. The film rights belong to someone else." The door closed and the dream seemed to crumble. But Lucas didn't leave that world he created his own. In a small San Francisco room, he wrote through countless nights. Instead of copying Flash Gordon, he built a new universe where Jedi Knights replaced Flash, where light and dark coexisted, where faith was stronger than technology. He envisioned a dreamy boy gazing at a twin-sun horizon, Luke Skywalker. And from there, a new galaxy took shape. Years later, when Star Wars was born, people asked Lucas if he regretted the Flash Gordon rejection. He just smiled. "No. If they'd said yes, I'd never have created this." From a bitter failure, he rewrote cinematic history. And so, from Flash Gordon's ashes, Star Wars was born. Not a copy of a dream, but a new dream that made the world believe in the impossible. 14. Half the sets were actually paintings. In the mid-1970s, when CGI and digital effects didn't exist, Star Wars' grand scenes were created in a silent room. There, industrial light and magic artists stood before massive glass panels nearly 2 meters tall, painting the universe with oil and imagination. Under golden light, each brushstroke crafted the endless Death Star corridors. Each silver-blue stroke turned glass into Cloud City's sky. Each tiny dot became thousands of stars. During filming, Luke Skywalker stood before a painting with light meticulously adjusted so the human eye couldn't tell real from illusion. Matte painting, this lens-deceiving technique, became the magic of an era. Those nameless artists painted half a universe with trembling hands and extraordinary patience. Their names weren't on posters, nor were they applauded at the Oscars, but they made audiences believe a galaxy truly existed out there. Every time the camera pans through the Death Star's halls or light glints in Cloud City, it's not just paint. It's the faith of people daring to dream big in an era without digital magic. Without them, Star Wars would never have been so grand, and we viewers might never have believed human imagination could paint an entire universe. 13. Chewbacca nearly got shot. In 1976, amidst California's redwood forest where Star Wars filmed scenes for the planet Kashyyyk, Peter Mayhew donned a thick suit of synthetic fibers and yak fur. Under the sun, it was like wearing a fiery armor, forcing him to remove Chewbacca's head after every scene to breathe. But the heat wasn't the worst danger. It was that he looked too real, a giant bear lumbering through the woods. Local authorities warned the area had hunters and the risk of a mistaken shot was high. George Lucas immediately assigned crew members in bright reflective vests to guard Mayhew. Throughout filming, the People's Wookiee was escorted like a head of state in the forest. Peter Mayhew once laughed, "Chewbacca didn't fear the Empire, just California hunters." But behind the joke was Hollywood's odd reality where a fictional creature was protected like a real one. If you were in that situation, would you keep filming in the forest or rip off the suit and flee that galaxy? 12. The Ewok costumes became mobile boilers. In California's redwood forest, chosen as the setting for the planet Endor, humid heat thickened the air like a boiler. Amidst the lush on-screen scenery, the galaxy's cutest furry creatures, Ewoks endured real torment. The artificial fursuits weighed over 10 kilograms, with no ventilation causing actors inside to sweat so much that water dripped through the fur. Some fainted on set, and the medical team handed out Gatorade like life-saving water. The crew even set up an Ewok recovery room where actors upon removing their heads were fanned and given ice packs. But some young actors turned it into a secret rendezvous spot to escape the director's gaze, amidst the heat-burnt fur smell and giggles behind closed doors. On screen, Ewoks were symbols of innocence and courage. In reality, they were true warriors not against the Empire but against the hellish heat of their own suits. If you could be an Ewok for a day, how long do you think you'd last in that mobile boiler? Don't hesitate to share in the comments. 11. Yoda was originally meant to be a monkey in a rubber mask. In the early days of The Empire Strikes Back, George Lucas wanted to create a tiny but lifelike Jedi Master. A bold idea emerged: hire a trained monkey, put on a rubber mask, dress it in a robe, and have it play Yoda. In the initial script, the monkey even had a personal assistant to teach it movements and staff holding. Then the first test happened. As soon as the mask was put on, the actor tore it off, threw it at the props, and ran amok across the set. It bit wires, knocked over lights, and sent the crew chasing in chaos. In 10 minutes, the plan collapsed. A technician sighed. "The monkey's smart, but it's no Jedi." When the idea was scrapped, Lucas turned to Jim Henson Puppetry Master, and the world got the Yoda we know today. No monkey, just wisdom, calm, and long ears, carrying 1,000 years of experience. 10. The crew nearly burned to death in Tunisia's desert. When Star Wars began filming in Tunisia's desert, the 500-person crew stepped into a real hell. Temperatures exceeded 54 degrees sand so hot it could melt equipment plastic. R2-D2 robots kept burning chips, and Anthony Daniels, C-3PO's actor, fainted after hours in his metal suit. Many technicians wrapped cloths around cameras to avoid burning their hands. One day, a sandstorm hit, swallowing the set in minutes. Statues, desert ships, and props were buried. Lucas stood amidst the sand sea, silently watching his work nearly swept away. If this desert could talk, It'd be laughing at us, he said, half joking, half desperate. Yet no one gave up. They rebuilt, worked from dawn to fiery dusk, drinking warm water like fire without stopping. When Star Wars hit theatres, Tatooine's golden frames stunned the world. 9. The secret romance between Leia and Han was real. Amidst London's set lights as A New Hope filmed its first scenes, a quiet romance sparked. Carrie Fisher, 19, fresh from home to play Princess Leia, and Harrison Ford, 33, a reserved married man who smoked and rarely smiled on cue. Between them was no script, just long nights after shooting, laughter, a few drinks, and silent moments too deep to describe. Fisher wrote in her memoir, The Princess Diarist, that it felt like a dream. For 3 months they hid it from everyone. No one in the crew knew. We were Han and Leia during the week and Carrie and Harrison on weekends, she wrote. When Ford drove her through London's rain, they said little, but their eyes spoke more than any line. The iconic, "I love you, I know in The Empire Strikes Back" was Ford's improvisation, but when audiences heard it, they believed it was a moment between characters. Only when the truth emerged did people realise those lovers didn't just exist in a distant galaxy, they truly loved right here in reality. 8. Luke Skywalker was really bitten by a snake. On screen, Dagobah was the Jedi training planet, wet and crawling with snakes. In reality, the set was no different, a real swampy forest, hot, humid, and full of actual creatures. As Mark Hamill climbed out of the mud-soaked X-Wing, dozens of snakes were released around him for natural atmosphere. But during filming, one struck. Hamill felt a sharp bite on his wrist, blood streaking down. He winced, but kept acting. No one in the crew noticed until the director yelled, "Cut!" Only then did he flash a faint smile, the Force or maybe adrenaline. The scene was kept. And every time audiences watch Luke struggle in the swamp, they don't know how much of it was real. 7. An accident forced Lucas to rewrite the script. In January 1977, before the world knew Star Wars, Mark Hamill suffered a horrific accident on a California highway. His sports car lost control, veered off, and flipped multiple times. When rushed to the hospital, the future Jedi's face was nearly destroyed. Broken nose, shattered cheekbones, torn lips. No one was sure he could act again. George Lucas faced a real crisis. Luke Skywalker's face, the symbol of the Force's light, was changed forever. But instead of recasting Lucas, turned the accident into part of the story. He rewrote The Empire Strikes Back, adding a scene where Luke is attacked by a wampus snow creature, a logical reason for Hamill's real scars. That decision brought Hamill back to the set, continuing as the hero, and Lucas saved his entire galaxy. If you look closely at Luke's face in the sequel, you'll see that light wasn't just the Force's, it was a man returning from the edge of life and death. 6. Darth Vader was once banished by Lucasfilm. In 1979, during The Empire Strikes Back's post-production David Prowse, the man in Darth Vader's black armour walked into a small UK interview. Known for his bluntness when a reporter asked about the upcoming ending, Prowse casually dropped a bombshell. Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father. That single line was like a bomb in the galaxy. George Lucas was trying to keep secret. Lucas was furious. The entire marketing campaign had to shift, and Prowse was instantly blacklisted. He was barred from official events, excluded from fan meetups, and his image was removed from publications. While other actors became honoured guests at Comic-Con or Star Wars celebrations, Prowse stood on the sidelines, a shadow of the character he lived as. When he died in 2020, Lucasfilm issued only a brief condolence, a cold end for the man who made the world tremble with a single breath. 5. The lightsaber sound was real, not a computer effect. In 1976, in a cramped Hollywood recording room, Young sound engineer Ben Burt hunched over an old 16mm projector. As its motor hummed, his microphone caught an odd sound, a low, resonant drone like metal waking up. Curious, Burt moved the mic along a live TV cable. The two sounds layered, buzzing, vibrating, creating something entirely new. He played it through speakers, the sound echoing across the room. Vroom vroom, light, yet powerful. When George Lucas heard it, he said one thing: "That's the Jedi's voice." So Burt experimented, moving the mic past speakers to mimic saber swings, fast for high pitches, slow for deep hums. No effects, no computers, just raw sound, born from curiosity and instinct. That lightsaber sound became Star Wars' soul, real, magical, familiar enough to summon childhood with a single hum. Have you ever grabbed a stick and made that vroom vroom sound yourself? Maybe we've all carried the Force inside, just forgotten it. 4. Alec Guinness hated Star Wars but returned anyway. Alec Guinness, British stage legend, conqueror of audiences with The Bridge on the River Kwai, nearly laughed reading the Star Wars script. He wrote to a friend, "I'm doing a silly film full of lines no one could understand." He called it trash for kids, but still took the role of Obi-Wan Kenobi, a decision even he didn't expect would change his life. When the film premiered in 1977, everything flipped. Obi-Wan became the galaxy's soul, and Guinness, the man who hated it most, became an icon. When Lucas invited him back for The Empire Strikes Back, he hesitated but agreed after hearing the terms payment based on a percentage of profits. A few days of filming over $50 million, one of Hollywood's greatest deals. Years later, when asked about Star Wars, he only smiled gently. "I still don't understand why they love that film so much. But if they believe in the Force, I believe in royalties." 3. The Stormtrooper banged his head on the door. Elstree Studios, London. A serious scene, stormtroopers march into the Death Star's control room. Cameras roll, heavy music plays, then clunk a sharp thud as an actor forgets to duck and slams his white helmet into a steel doorframe. The crew burst into laughter, and George Lucas decided to keep it. That accidental bump became a legendary mistake. In theatres, it flashed by in a second, but enough for fans worldwide to hunt for it. In the DVD release, Lucas even amplified the thud as a nod to the lovable error. In a universe of effects and precision, that silly detail made Star Wars more real, more human. Beneath the Empire's cold armour were just people, sometimes forgetting to duck. 2. A real fire nearly burned down the Death Star set. Summer 1976. At Elstree's film warehouse outside London, lights blazed amidst the Death Star's glossy black walls. Technicians adjusted high-powered lamps, and actors in white armour stood ready for the day's biggest scene. Suddenly, a small pop came from the electrical panel. In an instant, grey smoke poured from wall cracks, spreading fast across the set. George Lucas shouted to turn off the lights, but a short circuit made the system flicker wildly. A technician rushed to pull the main breaker while the crew grabbed fire extinguishers. The chaos felt like the Death Star itself was exploding in real life. When the smoke was cleared, a burnt smell lingered, the left wall was scorched, black paint peeling, and the crew was smudged like they'd fought a real battle. Yet like a miracle, filming resumed after a few hours. They finished the scene amidst smoky air and patchy light so real that Lucas kept it. When audiences watched Star Wars, no one knew the wall behind Darth Vader had actually burned. If that fire had grown just a bit bigger, the whole galaxy might have burned with the Death Star. 1. Star Wars was rejected by every studio. In 1975, George Lucas was a young director fresh off American Graffiti's success. He carried a thick draft titled The Star Wars, a sci-fi story he believed would change everything. He went to every Hollywood studio. Universal shook their heads. Too bizarre. Paramount said, kids won't understand. Disney flat out refused, not market-friendly. Lucas left meetings exhausted, clutching his script like a fading dream. But he didn't give up. He approached 20th Century Fox, a studio in crisis desperate for new ideas. Producer Alan Ladd Jr., after reading a few pages, didn't fully grasp the story, but believed in the storyteller. He said simply, "I don't understand this thing, but I trust you." And with that faint trust, 20th Century Fox invested over $10 million, a huge sum for a kids' movie. 2 years later, Star Wars hit theaters and became a global phenomenon, launching the modern blockbuster era. Years later, Lucas laughed. "I don't blame anyone who rejected it. If everyone believed me, Star Wars might not have been a miracle anymore." Star Wars isn't just a film, but a cultural phenomenon that redefined the cinematic universe. From crude special effects, George Lucas built a vivid galaxy where every character became an immortal icon. Over half a century later, the Force's light still shines. Each time the theme plays, people feel their childhood awaken among the stars. If you love exploring behind-the-scenes cinema and little-known secrets, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to catch more legends. The Force's light is always with you, and we have more adventures waiting in this galaxy.